Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I provide online divorce mediation and valuation services in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we will discuss preserving a family business when the owners divorce with Bob Boyd. He's a divorce lawyer in Atlanta. He's also the co-founder of Boyd, Collar, Nolen, Tuggle, and Roddenbery, and is a leader in family law who has received recognition from his colleagues across Georgia and the nation for his work in high net worth divorce litigation and contested custody cases. Talk a little bit about how do you prove, whose burden of proof is saying that the asset is separate, if you say anything is separate.
In Georgia, if it's the burden of proof is on the party claiming the separateness of the asset to prove it. If you don't mind, let me just make one comment on something you just said. One of the reasons that you settle these cases out of court is because you control the narrative, if you will, meaning the documents that settle the case. I had a case several years ago, family business, and it was, case one. Basically, one spouse was going to buy out the other. Mm-hmm. It was more complicated than that, but that was basically what happened. Both sides submitted proposals in the form of proposed orders to the judge about how the monitoring should go, what records should be made available, how the accounting should go. The judge decided to go out on his own, not follow what either of us said, but try to do a hybrid. And I can tell you those people had a mess for several years. Whereas if we would have settled the case, we would have done it in the most efficient way. It saved them tens of thousands of dollars. That's one reason on a closely held business, if possible, you stay out of court. You've got to control the documents.
Well, yeah. And, I think a lot of business owners and family businesses, there is a concern, sometimes there's enough money to go around, right? It doesn't mean that everybody wants to give them, like they feel like they're giving the money, but there's usually enough money to go around. The issue is how, how are we going to split? Okay, can we split the business in half? Can you take half? Can we split the dog in half? These types of things that are happening that lead to complications.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really, sometimes it's just that people are getting aggravated. Well, I want the dog, right? Well, you could figure out everything else. So sometimes it's emotions and things like that. But for the most part, if you get good attorneys to and experts to kind of face the facts, because the reality is the facts are the facts. I mean, I have a hard time with contriving financial numbers because it just is what it is.
That's it.
And unfortunately, and the more you start to face it, I think sometimes the faster the process can go. If you're just like, forget it, I hate that person, they're never going to get my business, then you're probably hurting yourself as well as that other person, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the proverbial killing the golden goose.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And you also, another thing that you got to get the client who wants to buy the business from the other spouse, you have got to get them past that mentality of, okay, they don't have enough cash to buy them up front. They don't want to, take on debt, from a third party lender to pay the money, although that's not a bad way to go. But they say, okay, I'll pay you X dollars over the next 5 years, whatever. You've got to get them over the mentality of, wait a minute, I'm working in the business every day, and now I've got to pay my ex for my hard work. And, you tell them, well, you're not really doing that. The value's being set now. You're going to increase it in value. You just got to pay for the value now. But getting over this, I'm working for my ex mentality is sometimes harder than it should be.
Well, and I'll take it a little step back, right? If we go back, a lot of times one of the contributing factors to a divorce is the way you talk about money to your spouse.
No question.
And if you say, well, I work and I make the money and you don't, or you start facilitating a, oh gosh, what do you give kids, right? When you give them an allowance, right? Yeah. When you start talking about terms that put you as a parent and your spouse as a child, that is, so some of these we already know are going to exist because you are getting divorced. And we know that those conversations, but even courts around the country have acknowledged that if one person goes and works and one person stays home with the family, that they are equally providing.
No doubt. No doubt.
And so the courts recognize that. Yeah.
100%. It's sometimes when I speak to non-legal groups about divorce, you always get the question, what's the most common reason people get divorced or have marital problems? And I know what they think I'm going to say. They think I'm going to say infidelity. Mm-hmm. I don't say that because I don't think it is the most common. I say lack of financial transparency. Mm-hmm. It's just like you said. It's one of the spouses thinks they're a parent and the other's a child, and this is my business and my money, and I'm going to give you an allowance. Mm-hmm. And you can use this credit card and I'll pay it. Mm-hmm. But don't go over your limit. Mm-hmm. That causes, to me, in my experience, that's one of the biggest causes people get divorced.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the mistrust comes from that. Like, I don't know how many times I can have clients come into my office and say, I don't know what we own. I don't know. I don't know how many bank accounts we have. I don't know where they're located. I don't know how many houses or cars we have, because one person was able to spend whatever they want with nobody checking. And then the other person was given the allowance, and like, you have, a certain number, and oh yes, you can use a credit card anytime you want, but I'm going to be checking. And what did you spend $32.53 on? Yet I went and bought a $10,000 boat, right?
Happens all the time.
It happens all the time. So that mistrust is coming from not knowing that the person is going out there and purchasing all this stuff, right? But not really knowing how much is coming in. Is it financed by debt? That's a big thing.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Somebody could be buying a bunch of stuff and like, oh, he spends all this money. We have all this money coming in. Little do they know it's all financed with credit cards and debt, because somebody wants to look successful.
Yep.
And we'll see that a lot as well.
Smoke and mirrors.